Welcome to Moneyweb at Midday, the actuality news show, offering unique insights and in-depth analysis, featuring South Africa's top business leaders, newsmakers, and analysts for today's professionals. Your host, Jeremy Maggs.
Hello, and thank you for listening to Moneyweb at Midday. In the next 30 minutes, I'll put some context around the numbers, perspective around the politics, some clarity around the choices facing us in South Africa. A warm welcome. I'm Jeremy Maggs. Coming up on the program today, exporters demand certainty as Cape Town's port overhaul enters a new era of private investment. A leadership crisis engulfs the PIC as board resignations and a regulator's probe raise fresh governance concerns. South Africa's pork market swings from shortage to surplus, sending prices lower for consumers. And is biohacking the future of health, or are peptides and TikTok wellness trends racing ahead of the science? It's Thursday, the 23rd of July. Exporters, I understand, are seeking urgent clarity over a proposed 25-year private terminal concession at the Port of Cape Town. Exporters Western Cape says the tender has caused a degree of confusion about which facilities are involved, also the future of the existing operator and the possible impact on cargo flows. In conversation now with Terry Gale, who is chairperson of Exporters Western Cape. Terry, a very warm welcome to you. So just explain to us what the central problem is with this concession process and why exporters are concerned.
Okay, thank you so much, and I thank you for the opportunity. Just from our side as well, the concession that they're looking at are the terminals, the key side of B, C, and D berths, which is currently concessioned out to Fresh Produce Terminal, FPT, that have been doing it for quite a number of years now and actually have run the operation very successfully and probably one of the best in the business who'll be able to do it. So our concern about this is, why do they want to concession something out that is already been concessioned out? I do understand it would, the concession that they have given FPT, I think, was for a limited number of years, and I know FPT have been fighting to get it extended. However, from our point of view, what we are trying to focus on is don't concession these three berths out. Concession, what we call out, is currently the main Cape Town MPT, container multi-purpose terminal, which is berth next to the cruise terminal, cruise from berth E. E is the cruise terminal, F and G, which is currently the multi-purpose terminal and actually is desperately in need of upgrading. Now, why I say that as well, the advantage of the current multi-purpose terminal is that it is almost wind-free. I think in Cape Town, nothing is actually wind-free. However, being wind-free, especially in season, it can be of great value to our deciduous exports as well.
So, Terry, explain to me then why this matters to exporters who operates these berths, provided the required performance standards are met.
Yeah, it does, exactly. And the thing is, as you can obviously understand, and you can see the figures coming out over the season, we had, like last year, when the deciduous and the grapes started, grapes in particular were heavily affected by wind, when the terminal went, the main terminal, which they use because it's generally all containerized cargo that the grapes are moving in from the main CTCT, there was no option to use any other terminal except what they had to do, because the grape farmers, they had to then move their containers to Port Elizabeth and Kruger at an extremely additional high cost. I think it was an average 28 to 30,000 rand. So that was, and the shipper has to bear that cost, not the importer, because they're not going to pay any extra. So if we had an alternative when the main terminal goes windbound, which could be CTMPT, which, as I say, is berths F and G, it would be absolutely perfect. And the problem is, what we need at F and G, we actually need what they call the ship-to-shore gantries, so that they actually can work the ships a lot more efficiently, and that's where the funding would come in, and the request for proposals, whoever put something forward would be able to operate a proper terminal.
At this point, this confusion then, is it causing real operational or commercial damage, or is the concern just about future uncertainty?
Yeah, good question. It's actually, I think it's just future uncertainty as well. There is no, at the moment, everything is being operated. And I think we have a window, I think it's toward the end of this year when the RFIs, and they are having a public meeting on the 6th of August, if I'm not mistaken. But it is causing confusion. And because what we're trying to say is, if you do want a concession out, and I've been speaking, we meet every week, every Wednesday morning, we meet with all the port officials, all the terminals, and I've been saying infinitum that why don't we look at CTMPT as an additional and as a support to the main terminal because of it being relatively wind-free. And unfortunately, the figures are telling us that CTMPT is actually a very lackluster terminal because it doesn't have the equipment to use the vessels. Vessels actually have to have their own ship equipment, their own gantries, because there are no actual gantries. They're cranes, landside cranes, but no actual gantries.
So technically and commercially, that's not really realistic.
No, it's not. At the moment, it's not. And this is why I say we're all very excited about the actual RFI that has gone out, and we don't object to that at all. We think it's absolutely incredible that Transnet are going this route. But what we're saying is, why don't we preferably look at the current container multi-purpose terminal, which is actually standing, not being in its full utilization. We've seen weeks there now at our weekly report. There's been no vessels alongside at all. There's been no movement of containers. And here it is. It just needs a proper upgrade, and it can actually come into use.
At what cost?
Well, it would be the cost from the point of view, because we're looking at a public-private partnership or concession. So the concessionaire would actually would be for his cost. It wouldn't be for Transnet's cost. And this is what we're fighting, because Transnet have gone for the RFI, but we feel the incorrect berths.
When you put this to Transnet, what kind of response are you getting?
Well, between you and me, and well, it's not between you and me.
No, it's not.
What we've done, it's actually we only heard about this, interestingly, on Friday, and the first we heard about it was when it was actually published in the Business Day.
So what's your plan going forward?
So I'm actually at the moment, I'm trying to engage with the people I'm supposed to, they could give you all contact details for the RFI. I've made contact with them. They haven't responded, but I'm going to make sure. And also I want to attend the meetings that they are going to be holding to actually voice our objection in public as well, which I'm obviously doing, but just to make sure that our voice is actually heard. It's so we've been fighting, as I said, for years to get CTMPT, and they've got the team, they've got good staff there now that are willing to work, and almost embarrassed you can feel when they issue their reports to us every week. Sorry, we had no vessels alongside this. We can feel their pain.
What specific clarification or commitment then are you looking for from Transnet before this process can move any further?
Well, I'm a voice in the wilderness, shall we put it like that. But the good thing is, as I always say, as exporters, because we're an independent voice, that's where we can actually up and say, I do know I also have the Cape Chamber's support in this as well, but we need industry support. Industry say, listen, this is actually what is going on. Why don't we use the main multi-purpose terminal, in particular the fruit industry? So prior to this coming meeting, I will gather together with the fruit industry, because they've got their different bodies, the Fresh Produce Exporters Forum and that as well. We'll engage, and then we go there as a body and say, listen, this is the way we feel. They can only say, yes, we understand, let's review this. Or, Transnet, unfortunately, is also Transnet as well. I think it's a big mistake that they actually are making. The good thing is we're moving in the right direction, but it's not quite the direction we would like it to be. And I think they also need to listen to industry stakeholders. I'm sorry to say, I've been in the industry many, many years. So from my side, I talk with passion, and I talk with an understanding of what is important and what the exporter actually requires.
All right, Terry Gale, thank you very much indeed. You are the chairperson of Exporters Western Cape, and obviously we will put this to Transnet. It will be interesting to see what they have to say in response. Thank you very much for joining us.
Moneyweb at midday, for all your up-to-date stories.
Now, the ongoing governance crisis at the Public Investment Corporation has deepened, with 6 non-executive directors resigning in just 1 week. The board was appointed less than a year ago, while the PIC is also operating without a permanent chief executive or chief investment officer. Now, this is important. With more than 3.6 trillion rand under management, including the pensions of government employees, the turmoil is raising serious questions about leadership, about political interference, and also the protection of investment decisions. I want to explore this in a little more detail in conversation now with Kaya Sitoli, who is a founder and director at the advisory firm Koruska Consulting. Kaya, a very warm welcome. So the resignation of 6 directors, the ongoing problems, what does it tell us about the depth of the crisis within the entity?
I think it essentially tells us that the crisis, the leadership and the governance crisis at the PIC has reached breaking point. And firstly, just on the issue of the numbers of the directors that have decided to resign, when you have a board of 11 and 6 of them say that, look, we quite simply cannot continue to be part of the structure, it does indicate that there is indeed a leadership crisis, depending on obviously who leads the board and what the issues are that the board is dealing with. But I think also in how the matters relating to the CEO in particular have been handled, you see that there is a much deeper problem relating to how the lines of authority are understood within the PIC and obviously with its shareholder and also its primary client, which is the GPF and the executives out there. So the chaos is simply the collective, chaos that has been developing over an extended period of time.
And as far as the board is concerned, the big problem here is a lack or a seeming lack of governance and oversight then.
Yeah, and the great tragedy, of course, is that what we now have ended up with is a board that firstly engaged on the question of the suspension of a CEO, and 2 board members took the view that the decision was incorrect. They were the first 2 to resign. And then thereafter, after the CEO was indeed suspended, then you've had these other 4 directors who have also said that, look, actually, we do not think we can continue to be part of this board. Now, naturally, when a board has a mass walkout of that nature, you have to be able to understand what were the issues, what are the points of departure that made it untenable for some of them to still remain as part of this board. But it's also quite important for us to acknowledge that the majority of those that remain are what you may refer to as the deployed board members. In other words, it's board members that either represent National Treasury or represents the main unions or represent the main client themselves. So perhaps these are individuals who are only still part of the structure because they obviously have to consult and get a mandate from the constituencies that have deployed them and say, this is the state of affairs, we'd like to exit, can you put someone else in the line? So again, ultimately, it's going to come down to questions being asked about the chair of the board, who's obviously been responsible for managing the affairs of the board and has clearly not done a job that gave the other board members comfort that they could stay. And he then has to explain himself what has happened, what are the issues that board members might have raised, what are the issues relating to the chief executive officer, and what is the best way forward.
So a real headache for government. What should the finance minister then have to do in the short term to restore some semblance of credibility and stability?
Well, he's already initiated a process of asking the remaining board members to essentially take him into their confidence about whether they should indeed remain as board members. Now, ultimately, that decision will come down to the fact that I may hear individual representations, I may understand what you as individual directors are saying, but unfortunately, the collective board, which is actually meant to be 13 people, there's been a mass walkout. So clearly, the structure of the board as it currently is inadequate. So you can either bolster the board by putting in new nominees or new directors to restore the board to the numbers that it needs to be, or he can say that actually everybody who was part of this particular chaos probably should be transitioned out and we get a brand new board. So those are the options at the table. But of course, the representations that he's going to get from the directors next week are going to be instrumental in that decision making.
The optics here are not very good. What does this do in terms of external investor sentiment when they look at South Africa and they see something like this happening?
Well, I think the main issue here is the hypocrisy that the PIC is clearly exhibiting here, in the sense that the PIC is the one institution that if anybody says, for example, they want to manage money on behalf of the PIC, you get taken through the most extensive and the most robust governance overviews and governance review processes. Nobody can go to the PIC and say, oh, we want to manage your money. We just don't have a CEO currently. We just don't have a CIO currently. And we just had a massive walkout of board members. Absolutely absolutely nobody can get away with that particular story. So the issue here is that the PIC understands what it takes to govern institutions of this nature. It understands what it takes to govern an institute that holds funds on behalf of others, and yet it doesn't seem to be able to practice it. So I think a lot of people are going to be really looking at just a hypocritical element of it. But I think for most investors, it's simply a matter of, look, for as long as funds are managed well by those that have been given the mandates to do so, then there isn't a crisis of fund management. It's a crisis of governance and leadership at the institution that is ultimately responsible for identifying who should help it manage some of the money, because obviously the PIC manages some of the money internally and some of it has been given to mandates to external parties to manage.
In any organization, where is the line then between board oversight and interference in day-to-day management?
In every organization, it will be very clear. There'll be a board charter that says the board is responsible for this. Then it will be very clear what management is responsible for. The PIC's unique problem is that it essentially has at least three, if not four, centers of accountability. And what that means is that the chief executive officer, who would ordinarily be the one that says, I'd like to employ these people in order to help me execute on this strategy and this mandate, well, the one position that he cannot unilaterally decide on happens to be the second most important position at the PIC, and that's the position of the chief investment officer. So in this case, when the chief investment officer, who was there at the time, left the PIC, the CEO then said, well, we need someone to act in the position, find someone internally to act in that position, only to be told later on that actually the GEPF has got some concurrence or veto rights over that appointment. You did not consult him, so therefore that's an issue that we're going to put as part of your suspension issues. Now, you can already see that this is not an ordinary institution. No other institution would be told that actually you're accountable to the board, but in relation to the appointment of these executives, here's another accountability structure, and then ultimately there is still a shareholder who has the overall authority over this institution. It is that confusion, it is that chaos, it is that noise that creates a perpetual governance crisis at the PIC.
And if that's the case, what risk then does this current instability pose to government employees' pensions, do you think?
Well, primarily the risk is the risk of paralysis. And what that paralysis means is that when you have decisions that need to be made and investments that need to be made, or even investments that need to be exited, and you suddenly do not have a CEO and you do not have a chief investment officer, those decisions are not going to be made with at least a sense of fluidity that they should be. And ultimately, what that means is that there may be opportunities that the PIC, or the investment opportunities that the PIC should be capitalizing on, that will indeed be missed on the basis that until somebody knows what's going on, nobody's going to make a decision. There's also the reality that whenever there's a crisis of this nature, even those that are within the institution who still have roles, who still have responsibilities, they are more likely to be reluctant to take critical and difficult decisions when there is no proper structure in place, where there is no accountability structure that they're accustomed to. So you see that particular paralysis in the short run. In the long run, if that paralysis persists and ultimately the returns that the PIC generates from the funds that it holds under custody, if those returns now start suddenly being suboptimal in the sense that they're not as good as they need to be, you do have a long run problem of whether the GEPF will remain solvent enough. And what that means is that the GEPF at particular intervals has to ask the question of what its obligations are to the pensioners, and that's the liability side, and the question of what are the assets that have been generated or the assets that exist to honor those obligations. So if the PIC doesn't do its job and those assets are not growing, then you may have a solvency crisis. But that's a long run problem. It's not something that materializes in the short term.
Kaya Sithole, thank you very much indeed.
You're listening to Moneyweb at Midday.
Now, I read that South Africa's pork market has swung rapidly from fears of a shortage to a significant surplus, and that has pushed wholesale prices sharply lower. One of South Africa's largest and oldest pork producers, Escort, says precautionary imports arrived just as local production recovered from disease restrictions. And that has created excess supply and probably good news, cheaper prices for consumers. The Chief Executive Officer of Escort, Arnold Prinsloo, a very warm welcome to you. So initially, did the pork industry get its supply forecast wrong?
Yes, indeed. As you know, many times people overreact, and we also overreacted because we were unsure of what foot and mouth was going to do to the supply, and we imported. And when you import, it takes between 8 to 12 weeks for the product to land in the country. and it coincided with the supply from the farmers that improved dramatically after the foot and mouth outbreak, and therefore we have this massive surplus.
How big is that surplus?
The surplus is quite big. We think that it will take up to 6 months to balance the supply and demand again.
The resulting oversupply then, was it avoidable, do you think, or partly perhaps a broader failure of coordination across the entire industry and supply chain?
No, it was not avoidable. It's the first time that we've had foot and mouth amongst our suppliers in the pork industry, and we didn't know how to handle it. Neither did the government, and they couldn't give us proper information on how long the restriction would be on the farms before they could supply us. Initially, it was 90 days. And with the help of the new Minister of Agriculture, it was reduced to 42 days. So, it's just one of those things.
I assume that your industry would be satisfied now with the foot and mouth strategy that has been implemented by the new Agriculture Minister.
Yes, we are. There's still a shortage of vaccines, but it's improving rapidly. So we think within 3 months we'll have enough vaccines in the country.
And Arnold, let's talk about the economics now if we can. Wholesale prices, as I understand it, have fallen from around 40 Rand to 30 Rand a kilogram. How much financial pressure then is that placing on local farmers, do you think?
It's actually not the whole price. It's the price to the farmers decreased from 40 Rand to 30 Rand. And it puts enormous pressure on the farmers. Fortunately, the maize price is still cheap, relatively cheap. And we think the maize price will only increase later next year. So fortunately, there's not that much pressure on the farmers and on the maize price side. But there's definitely pressure on the farmers with the 30 Rand farm price.
And therein lies the problem, I imagine, because smaller producers could potentially be forced out of business while
Indeed.
Consumers enjoy temporarily cheaper pork, right?
That's correct, yeah.
So you expect prices then to recover at some point. What gives you the confidence that the market is going to stabilize within that time frame that you referenced?
Look, the cure for low prices to the farmer would be low prices to the consumer. So we have reduced our prices. For instance, bacon price will reduce by 10 Rand per packet, and pork chops would reduce by 20 to 30 Rand. And that will get the consumer to buy more, and that will balance the supply and demand.
So, Arnold, let's move up the supply chain then. How quickly would lower wholesale prices be reflected on supermarket shelves if that is not happening already?
It's happening already. It took about 3 months to adjust the prices in the retail market, and you'll see within the next week those prices will filter through. There are already promotions in big retailers like Checkers, Pick n Pay, and Spar, and Macro, and the prices will come through within a week.
Are retailers, though, or there's the danger, let me rephrase it, there's always the danger, is there not, that retailers might not pass on the full saving and maybe margins widen somewhere else in the supply chain?
Jeremy, the whole industry is advertising the lower prices all over. And interviews like this would also help to put pressure on the retailers.
But obviously your company, Arnold, benefits from selling more pork when prices fall. How do consumers know that these figures are not simply part of a broader promotional message?
No, remember we bought stock. We imported stock at very high prices. And we also have stock where we paid the farmers 40 Rand. So that must be accommodated as well.
And you say there's no food safety risk, which is good news. What distinction should consumers understand between livestock disease and the safety of pork for human consumption?
It's the same as beef and for pork. It's an animal disease and not doesn't affect human consumption.
So you seem to have solidified the situation now, and this is a final question then. Is there anything that you think government or the industry needs to change now to prevent the next disease outbreak from producing another damaging shortage and surplus cycle? In other words, I'm assuming here that there have been some rich lessons that have been learned.
Very much. I think the cooperation between industry and the Minister of Agriculture and his office improved dramatically with the appointment of the new minister. And but unfortunately, foot and mouth will remain with us at least for the next 2 years.
And finally, Arnold, then, for those of us who are meat eaters, you would recommend, no doubt, a good pork chop on the braai tonight.
Absolutely, Jeremy.
All right, I'll leave it there. Arnold Prinsloo, thank you very much indeed. He is the Chief Executive Officer of Escort, one of the country's largest and oldest pork producers. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
You're listening to Moneyweb at Midday.
Now let's move on to health matters, and as I understand it, NAD is a natural substance in the body that helps our cells produce energy and carry out basic repair work. The NAD or NAD Clinic is a private longevity and wellness company and is offering NAD Plus drips, peptide treatments and other therapies aimed at improving energy, recovery and healthy aging. But here's the question, are consumers paying for proven medicine, or are the treatments something where promise maybe is still running slightly ahead of the evidence? Whichever way you look at it, it is a debate that is front and center in medical circles at the moment. Medical Director at NAD Clinic, Dr. Siddharth Govender, is with me now. And Doctor, first of all, just in plain English, what should a healthy person realistically expect to feel or experience after one of these treatments?
Well, a healthy person should experience an uplift of energy, having a little bit higher concentration levels. There's also something we call brain fog, which basically means that a person normally feels like a little lethargic and everything feels hazy. So after the treatment, that brain fog should start to lift. Also, you should be able to recover faster from training and also be able to kind of add more to your plate, essentially, from your daily needs.
Are they proven, these drips, at this point to make people healthier, or at this stage are they being sold maybe before the science is being settled? Because you will concede there's a lot of talk around this and there is a fair amount of contention.
Well, yeah, I completely understand the idea, the contention. And when you take into, for example, you look at the NAD, which is you mentioned it earlier, it's a naturally occurring like coenzyme. It stands for like nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. So I don't know how many people remember from their high school biology, but basically it's kind of what you use to create energy in your body. So when you're looking at like a molecule like this, it's definitely, it's been around for 70 years. People have been researching it. There's a lot of cellular research about it and how it affects your cells and how we need it on a regular basis, and how over a period of time it starts to decrease in our bodies as we get older. So there is science back behind it. And at NAD Clinic, we have an international team of doctors and scientists that have been doing papers and research and things like that. So you can find papers about it on our website. But yeah, so we at NAD back everything up by the science, basically. We don't believe in anything that's not evidence-based.
Let me ask you a placebo effect question. How do you establish that the patient has genuinely improved rather than simply feeling better because they expect the treatment to work?
Well, so that's an interesting question. So we at NAD, we have proprietary diagnostics which are used overseas, within America and the rest of the world, where we can measure like how well your body is doing in terms of coping with stress, how well it's doing with coping with your metabolic needs. And then we also revert to age-old blood tests. So we also take bloods from our clients and have a full blood panel done. So we have a before and after to compare. So it's not just we're not just looking at the feeling behind it, but we're looking at the science behind it as well.
Could some of the benefit, though, simply just not come from hydration, rest, or lifestyle changes rather than NAD plus itself?
Well, look, at the end of the day, yes, some of those could come from that. And like we always at NAD, we believe in a very holistic approach. So we believe that, you should be eating well, you should be hydrating well, you should be sleeping well. And yes, obviously, when you do those things, it starts to affect your life in a positive way. Now, what we're saying with like NAD, for example, is that we're basically saying that it's helping you further improve. So yes, you will improve with those lifestyle modifications, but with an NAD plus drip, or with a coenzyme, or any of our other treatments, we would help you improve that a little bit more, essentially. So, yeah.
Dr. Governor, I fully acknowledge that you run a business, but how often do you tell someone they don't need NAD plus or peptide therapy?
Quite often, to be honest. Like we have to build a whole biological profile on the person. So it depends on what the biological profile says. So we are very for assessing a person's health and seeing how it works into their lifestyle. Now, if there is a glaring reason as to why they don't need it, we wouldn't want to prescribe it, essentially. But yeah, for the most part, we back it down by science, essentially.
And what are the risks or the side effects that consumers maybe don't know about?
And as in medicine, there's always, with any medicine, even with paracetamol and things like that, you would also find side effects. Look, with NAD, there are some administration side effects where some patients may feel a little bit of burning, but that's also a normal thing, and it tends to disappear very quickly after they feel a little bit of chest burning, and it tends to disappear very quickly after the administration of the medication or the NAD, the supplementary. So you can feel some side effects, such as like I said, burning in the chest, in the stomach, but it's very not often seen. You also can feel a little bit of palpitations. We see there are a few side effects like that, but for the most part, not very serious, no.
And what about the cost?
When it comes to the cost, look, you have to factor in a lot of the R&D and things like that. So, and also the fact that we're trying to build a biological profile for yourself. And so we start off at around 800 to 1,000 Rand, and that's for one of our treatments, and then it goes all the way up. It just depends. Like I said before, it's a very tailored approach. So it's not a one cost fits all kind of scenario.
When you say goes all the way up to what?
So we would say for a single infusion, it would go up to about 2,000, 2,500.
And covered by medical aid or not?
Not covered by medical aid, no.
At some point you would expect that to happen or not yet?
Yes, at some point I would expect medical aids to start covering it, because in the medical aid industry, it's all about preventative medicine, and for them, anything that's preventative, they're very slow to adopt, but over time they should start covering it.
Dr. Siddharth Govender, thank you very much indeed, Medical Director at NAD Clinic. Appreciate your time. Thank you. And on that note, we are going to leave it. You've been listening to Moneyweb at midday, and we are here every weekday at noon with the latest in current affairs, the economy and policy. You can always catch the podcast version a little later. Thank you for making us part of your day. Until next time, goodbye.
Listen to the daily live stream of Moneyweb at midday, or download episodes on moneyweb.co.za, the Moneyweb app, Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or follow Moneyweb News on social media for more updates. Moneyweb, your trusted source for business and investment insights.